Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me. Apologies if you were here a few minutes ago. I was here trying desperately to get online. Facebook decided that my internet was off, which it wasn't. Everything was working on my other devices, so I don't know what that was. Don't we love a technical glitch? But I'm here now and very happy to be with you. So I'm just going to check on my iPad and see if I can see myself, which is always a good thing, because then I can see what you can see and I can see your comments. Okay, let me find myself and just turn up the volume and hopefully I can hear myself speaking. And there doesn't seem to be any volume. So that's not good. So what I'm going to have to do is start again. So, oh no, there I am. There I am. There was just, I don't know what that was. That was weird. Okay, thank goodness for that. I don't need to start again. We had enough of that last week. Okay, so welcome back if you were here 2 weeks ago when I did part 1 of using masks and stencils. I explained then that Stampin Up call them masks, I call them stencils. So I've put both in the title, but I'm sure I will be using the word stencil as we go. Before I do that, just a couple of reminders about things. First of all, there is the inked and, is it called inked and tiled? Yeah, Ink Botanicals with the inked and, that coordinates with the inked and tiled stamp set. That's where that's come from. The Inked Botanicals sweet sampler is live to order. I'll show you that in a minute when I move the camera down. The second thing to do is to remember to use your bonus days coupons if you earned them in July. I have emailed out to everyone that I know of who hasn't yet spent their coupon. If you do have any coupons lurking in your emails, remember each coupon code is worth £4.50 off any order at all. It doesn't have to be a minimum value or anything like that, but you have to spend them this month, so you haven't got much longer to do that. And third thing just to highlight to you is that my Christmas extravaganza is now open for booking. I know it seems awfully early to think about Christmas. There are several reasons why you can book now. You have a couple more weeks to do so, so you haven't got to do it today or anything. There's an awful lot of preparation for it, so I need a really long lead time in to order everything and prepare all the packs and then have them ready for the class. And secondly, because I won't be at work for a few weeks during October, I've got to be just a little bit more on top of things than usual. So there we go. That's all the news and announcements, I think. I'm just going to see if there are any comments here. I'm hoping that you're going to be able to hear me and see me all right. It looks like you can. So I'm just going to move the camera down to my desk without further ado and quickly show you the sweet sampler. I did show you last week. No, it wasn't last week. It was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, last time. However, I did have an issue with the sound. I don't know what it was, and it may well have been over that bit, so I'll quickly show you again. So let's just cover up the camera so that you hopefully won't feel seasick while I move things. Then I'm just going to reverse myself so that I won't be upside down, and then change the position of the camera, and then last of all fiddle around with the leads so that they are hopefully not in your way. Right, so I'm hoping I've got the camera more or less in the right position. We'll see. Okay, so that could come forward quite a bit more, couldn't it? Let's try that. Let's try and get it straight, which always helps. And just give you a little bit more desk. And a little bit straighter, and then I think we'll be there. And did you notice I actually have been turning it the right way to get it straight? I can't promise that'll continue till next time, but I'm not doing so badly today. Okay, so let me just try and hook this lead up a little bit so that it's not dangling everywhere. I'll try a different tactic today. Let's see if this works okay. I think it might. All right, so the Inked Botanicals sampler. This is one of my favourite sweets in the annual catalogue. It's absolutely beautiful. So you get some coordinating card. So you've got 5 sheets there. You've got Crushed Curry, Lost Lagoon, Pool Party, Calypso Coral and Petal Pink. Then you've got a half a pack of this beautiful paper. It's patterned both sides. It's 6 inches square. I'm going to quickly run through that for you. All the colours in the card are reflected in the paper, and all the patterns on here were created by pressing real flowers and leaves and then dipping them into ink or paint and printing them, and then photographing that and turning it into paper. So they are actually, when it's called Inked Botanicals, they really are inked botanicals. So there are some really bright and some much more subtle patterns on this, and I've been using them for all kinds of projects. I've made lots and lots of cards. I've made an album. I posted pictures of that the other day, you may have seen that. Made cards for men, cards for women. I've made thinking of you cards. I've made fancy fold cards. It's just really, really versatile. I love the colours. And then to go along with that and finish off your projects, you have half a reel of this Lost Lagoon bordered ribbon. Lift that up. I'm hoping I can leave it in the cellophane. It just keeps it clean. I don't think this is made of linen, but it looks and feels like a woven linen. It's beautiful, very soft and easy to tie. And then a quarter of a pack of brushed brass butterflies. I felt you needed something in the embellishment line, so the brushed brass butterflies work beautifully with flowers, of course. So you have until the 8th of September to order that, which I think that must be 2 weeks today. And the cost of it, if you can collect it from me either at my house or at a class, it's £14, but I can certainly post it out to you, and that will cost £16.50, which is second class postage and a board backed envelope. And if you would like to order that, or if you'd like more information about it, or indeed if you'd like information on my Christmas extravaganza, which is an all-day Christmas class running on November the 11th, just outside Leamington, then this is how you can get hold of me. Drop me an email on there. And my classes calendar is on my website here. All right, so let's get going with today's projects then. So I did briefly show you some new masks which are coming in the new autumn and winter catalogue last time I showed them to you. This is the catalogue. I can't show you them inside the catalogue because until this goes live on the 6th of September, I'm not allowed to show you, but it's lovely. And I'm in the process of getting those out to all my customers. So if you are a current customer, if you've bought from me or come to a class in the last 6 months, you will be receiving one of those catalogues. If you're new, if you're just finding me and you're in the UK or Europe, then let me know. I'll very happily send a catalogue out to you and you can order from me. So this is a sneak peek. This is from that new catalogue. These are called the Abundant Beauty Decorative Masks. Now the one I'm not going to use today is a sort of a hound tooth pattern. Let me just pop that on something dark so that you can see it more easily. There we go. So this is really versatile. I think it's going to be particularly good for kind of vintage style or men's cards. It's a much more neutral pattern than some of them are. However, I'm not going to use that one, but I am going to use the other 6 which are in this pack. It's a fantastic package of masks. I'll pop this information just there for you. So when you get your new mini catalogue, it's shown twice. It's shown at the back on page 77 in the index with pictures, but mainly on page 47. The number's 162331 and you get 7 masks. They cost you £10. They are half of them are this size, which is 6 inches square. That one I just showed you is 7 by 5, I think. Yeah, 7 by 5 1/4. And I'll show you 2 others which are rectangles as well, slightly different size again. So the ones I'm going to show you are a set of 4, and these create a sunflower, which I'm going to do for you. Then I'm going to show you a couple of finished samples. Now these masks, put down your ink in layers. So if I get them in order, we've got sunflower petals, we've got sunflower leaves, we've got sunflower centres, and we've got sunflower centre details. And each of these masks is numbered on the top left hand corner, which is the suggested order of use. You don't have to use them in that order, but it's suggested that you do, and certainly I found that very easy to do. They've also got a little notch here in the top corner, and this is to make it even easier for you to layer them together. So let me actually do something with them and then you will see. Now I'm going to bring in a frightening number of ink pads here because I'm showing you kind of the maximum maximum look that you can do with these. You do not have to have all these ink pads. You could do it with just, you know, you could do it with 2 or 3 even. But these are the colours that I'm going to be using. They're Daffodil Delight, Crushed Curry, Pumpkin Pie, Old Olive, Mossy Meadow, Cajun Craze and Early Espresso. And what I've actually got there are 2 yellows, 2 oranges, 2 greens, and then a dark brown. So you could have 1 yellow, 1 orange, 1 green and a dark brown, or you could even leave the dark brown and just do an extra layer of one of your oranges, which would give you a more intense colour instead of the dark brown. So those are the colours that I'm using. Let me bring in a piece of card and let me start with mask number 1. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just lining my card up on my grid paper. I'm going to lay out my stencil on there, and then once I've got that somewhere I like it, I'm actually just going to put a little bit of washi tape on the back of my card just to make sure it doesn't move. So this is just any old washi tape. I'm just folding it back on itself so it's sticky both sides. I'll pop that on the back. That'll just keep that in place. If you're using, if you don't have washi tape but you do have masking paper, this is Stampin Up masking paper, which is brilliant for creating, what's the word I'm trying to use, kind of perspective on your projects by masking images, and I'm not going to go into that now. If you know, you know. If you've used it before, then you will probably have some masking paper. Little strips of this will actually stick on top of your card and will peel off without marking the front layer of that. But for this I just need to keep it in place on here for the purpose of the demonstration, so a bit of washi tape on the back is fine. Okay, so I've anchored my card down, which is helpful because I'm going to be putting lots of different masks on top, removing them, adding another one. And then what I'm going to do is just mark the top left corner of where that stencil is. If I take that off, you can see I've got the corner, then I've got that V shape, and that's going to enable me to very, very accurately place all the subsequent stencils. Now, you don't really need to do this. I'll show you in a minute when I line up stencil number 2 that it's very straightforward, in fact, to locate all the layers. But that V is really good, and at least if you know how to use it, you can decide whether or not you're going to. So I'm bringing in an ink blending brush here. I absolutely love these. If you don't have them, then you could use a sponge dauber or a piece of sponge. But I think these are fantastic, and I'm going to pick up some Daffodil Delight ink on my blending brush. I normally have a clear block. I haven't got one within reach, but I just work it a little bit just to make sure I haven't got a big blob on there. And then I'm going to come in and blend ink all over those 3 sunflowers. I could tape down the mask just to make sure it doesn't move, but I've done this quite a lot and I'm fairly confident of keeping things still. Let's hope that's not famous last words. And I have 6 different techniques to show you with stencils today, and they're slightly more advanced in that they need slightly more tools or crafting materials which are perhaps not ones that beginners would have in their stash, but they are not something that only a beginner can, that only an expert can do. So that is my Daffodil Delight ink. That's my lighter yellow ink. I'm now going to come in using the same stencil with crushed curry ink, which is a slightly darker yellow. And I'm going to ink them again, but this time aiming to leave the tips of the petals uninked. Now this will just blend in with that first yellow and provide a little bit more intensity. I'm not measuring how far down the petals I go or anything, I'm just doing this by eye. I'm going to do the other flowers the same. This is one of the smaller ink blending brushes, which I find is much easier, particularly on these smaller flowers, than one of the larger blending brushes. And actually I even like these for quite big areas. And I'm working just round and round and round in a circle. Now I can always come back with the same colour if I decide I don't have enough of it on there. It's perfectly fine to come back with it. So that's my 2 yellows. I'm now going to come in with my lighter, not purple, my lighter orange, which is Pumpkin Pie. I'm going to switch blending brushes to one that I keep for colours in the orange family. Just make sure that I haven't moved this. So again, pick up some of that orange, check it's not blobby, and now I'm aiming to go just round in the centre, so not much up the petals at all. So I'm putting some of the orange ink actually on that blanked out centre part here, and then just going on the immediate area around that. And my 3 sunflowers will each look different, which is perfect, because if you look at plants in nature, they're never identical. There we are. So that's 3 colours of ink. You could use 2, you could even use 1 colour, and you could just add more applications of it as you get further towards the centre of the flower. And blending and layering these inks gives you flowers with wonderful depth. So now what I'm going to do is remove that. You will be able to see, I'm not going to pick it up because obviously I've just carefully glued it to the desk, but you can see already those flowers have lots of depth to them. So now I'm going to bring in number 2. I'm going to line it up with my pencil mark and that notch, but actually, you know, I could switch this around really anywhere I fancy on here, anywhere that looks good for the leaves, and I can see through it. I can see exactly where those flowers are, so it's very easy to position the leaves. So I'm going to find a brush for greens. So I'm picking my lighter green, which is Old Olive. It's not a very light green, but it's lighter than Mossy Meadow, which is my other one. And I'm going to go all over these leaves. Now, of course, the flowers are protected, so it doesn't matter how messy I am. I'm not going to get green on those flowers because the stencil isn't cut for the flowers. I've gone a bit dark over there, but never mind. Okay, so that's a first coat of a lighter green onto my leaves. I'm actually going to switch brushes again to one that I keep for dark greens and bring in Mossy Meadow. I don't think I can see any questions yet, but if you have any as we go along, please ask. So here we go with Mossy Meadow, same stencil, and this time I'm just going to add a little bit of that darker ink down the centre. So this is very approximate, but I'm just having a relatively light touch with it. And this one here is kind of a sideways on leaf, so I'm just applying it at the top end. So I'll take this off. If I don't like it, I can always put the stencil back and add some more but actually that looks fine. So I've now got quite a multi-dimensional look on the flowers and the leaves, and it's time to do the leaf center, the flower centers. So this is stencil number 3, which I'm going to do with Cajun Craze, which is a kind of a burnt orange ink. So line the stencil up. Now, I don't know if it's showing, but you can see just the inside edges of the petals when the stencil's in the right place. That's fine, it's supposed to be like that, so it doesn't mean that you haven't located things properly. It just means that you don't end up with a gap between your petals and your flower centre. I was looking at some sunflowers the other day in someone's garden. We haven't grown any this year. And I realised just how accurate this stencil is. When you come to the detail for the centres of the flowers on the next stencil, which is the last one, they actually have observed that really, really well. Okay, so that's the background of my flower centres. And then finally, I'm going to add some real depth to that with my darkest colour, which is Early Espresso. So again, I'm lining up this notched corner, making sure that everything lines up beautifully. Find my browns blending brush, and then just go over this. So this adds a sort of a C shape. It darkens the very centre of the flower centre, and it also adds some little dots. Okay, so this is the really exciting part when I lift this last one off. There we are. And let me lift this up and show you. So here are my sunflowers. Now that's really quite quick to do. That took me, I think, about 5 minutes. So it doesn't have to take ages and ages, but you really can get lovely effects. Now, of course, you could cut these flowers out with scissors and layer them up. You could make them the top layer on something. You can use the stencils as backgrounds. You can use, obviously, the flowers as focal points. And you can really play around with colours. If you look in any garden centre at their racks of seeds, you will see that sunflowers come in all kinds of shades. So they don't just have to be yellow petals. So let me show you a couple of finished projects. So this is one where I've used exactly the same colour scheme as you've just seen me create with. I used an old olive card base, and I stenciled the leaves on here in just old olive ink, just to give me an all-over background pattern. And then I created the focal point with the flowers, just as you've seen me do. This embossing folder is called, I believe it's Distressed Brick. It's in the annual catalogue. And these are new. There's another sneak peek for you. I think I've got the packet here. Let me have a look. Yes, I have. These are called adhesive backed speckled dots. And they're really rather nice. They're not too shiny. They do actually have a sort of a sparkle to them, but it's really subtle. And the colours in them are, I believe, Pecan Pie, Crumb Cake, Moody Mauve and Mossy Meadow, I believe. But it's not written on the pack. So that's my first sample. A little bit of stenciling inside as well. And then I did another one, which is the same but different. So it's the same pieces and parts, if you like, just arranged differently. And this time I used a different selection of colours. I love those kind of purpley burgundy sunflowers. So these are the colours that I used for this card. Cajun Craze, Cherry Cobbler, Berry Burst, Lemon Lime Twist, Old Olive, Pecan Pie and Early Espresso. And then this card, this time I stenciled it with the flower and the simple circular centre. I just use Cajun Craze ink on top of Cajun Craze card. Lift that up and show you the detail again. Wrong way, there we go. Thank you, Jackie. I'm glad you like them. You say the sound is fading in and out. That's really not good. I was hoping it was going to be all right today, but Facebook did do an update a couple of days ago, and I find that quite often messes up the way, for some reason, the way Facebook deals with sound. It usually sorts itself out, but I've often had problems, and I've taken some advice, and it's not me, it's Facebook. So I hope that you can hear okay. All right, so that's a couple of sunflower cards then, with the sunflower masks. So let's do something else very quickly with another mask that is in the same pack. So this one is Leaves and Acorns. You put that on a dark background so you can see it. So this is from the same pack, the Abundant Beauty masks in the new catalogue. This is a lovely pattern, and you can really have fun with this. So all I'm going to do is put this on top of some card, pull out some inks. Let's use 4 colours this time, and I'll change them up a little bit just to make life interesting. So here I have Pecan Pie, Copper Clay, Wild Wheat and Mossy Meadow again. It doesn't really matter which order you do them in, but I'll work light to dark. So this is Wild Wheat. A juicy ink pad, so I need to remember to use a light touch, and all I'm going to do is randomly colour some areas on here. I'm not really thinking much about what I'm doing. I'm just getting some of that Wild Wheat ink down, again working in a circular motion. I haven't even bothered this time to anchor my card down, as these really are very easy to use. Okay, so let's change colour. Let's go to Pecan Pie, which is a lovely warm brown. Just make sure that I had moved that a little bit, but it's quite easy to get it back. And again, I'm going to randomly go over, joining up with some of the bits I've done before and some new bits. And what I'm going for here is that idea of the leaves changing in autumn, and you know, you get some of them where they are part green and part orange. Some of them are all orange, some of them are all brown. So there's no right or wrong here, just pick some autumn leaf colours and you're away. And you can see I just knocked that, it doesn't matter, it's easy enough to match it back up with where I was. And there we go, so that's Pecan Pie. Next I'm going to bring in some Copper Clay. And once again, some new areas and some overlap with where I was before. And I'm not just trying to go on to white card. I'm quite happy if one ink colour overlaps another. In fact, I think that looks better. So you don't have to plan your colours in advance with this. You can just go for it and have fun. So now this is my last colour. This is Mossy Meadow. So I'm just going to fill in any areas which have white left on them. And once I've taken the stencil off, if I decide I've got too much of any one colour, I can just carefully put the stencil back in place and come back in with a different colour and add a little more of that to the mix. It's just very forgiving, it's very easy to do. And because I'm using just the classic stamping inks, these are all water-based, so to clean the stencils, I just run them under the tap. They don't need warm water, they don't need soap, they don't need anything. They're really easy to clean. The ink just washes straight off. So I think I've done all that. There we go. Let's turn it that way. So you've got beautiful multicoloured images very quickly and easily. Now you can see I've got a border here. That's because my card was wider than the actual cut part of the stencil. So all I would do to fill that in is I would put the stencil back down. I can see through it as to where the ones that I've already done are. I'll just push the stencil up so that it's filling in some of that white space, not overlapping any of the leaves I've done before, and just go again. Let me just do that on a few very quickly. I'm not going to worry about changing colours and things, but just to put a few in so you can see. And there we are. There are your leaves. And in fact, I did exactly that on the finished sample, which I'm just going to show you. Very inky. I'm going to find a baby wipe. Let me just pop that there for you to look at. So I did the background in exactly the same way as I've just shown you, with exactly the same colours. And then I added some die cut medallions on the front with some stamping, some pecan pie ribbon, and then I think that's on my fingers stained rather than going to come off. And then I actually cut out a few of the leaves here, mounted them on dimensionals, and just added them to the front. So for anyone who's got an autumn birthday, I think that's a really nice card. And inside I put a piece of masking paper down to give me a straight edge, and then I stenciled down the side of the insert as well. So that's that one. So that's two. That's sunflowers and autumn leaves. So the next thing I'm going to do is show you some stencils with embossing powder and also with enamel effects. So let me just tuck these brushes away in their box. I'm not going to need those for the moment. Alright, so bear with me while I pull out some bits and pieces. Oops, sorry, I'm just catching everything in my microphone lead. Okay, so what I have here are everything I need for heat embossing, and if that's something you've done before, that won't come as any surprise to you. I've got some card here. I've chosen a darker colour because I'm going to use silver embossing on it, and I think it will show really nicely on there. I have an embossing buddy. We no longer sell, do we sell these? Yes, we do. They're in the embossing bits and pieces pack, which I think you can find online. There's a little tray and there's a brush, and I think there's some tweezers in there as well. We don't have them individually. We used to, but we don't have them individually anymore. And then I've actually got here Versamark ink refill. Now, you can use a Versamark ink pad for this, that's fine. This is what you would use to refill your ink pad. But when I'm using stencils, I actually prefer to use the refill because I find it's easier and quicker to get it onto my sponge dauber, which is something else that you need for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the sponge dauber to apply Versamark ink, which is our embossing ink, through the stencil onto the card. And we're going to add embossing powder, and then we're going to heat everything. So the stencil I'm using is this one, which has snowflakes on it. Once again, it's from that Abundant Beauty set from the new forthcoming mini catalogue, which you can order from September the 6th. So this is Snowflakes. Sorry, I haven't got that very well in shot at all, have I? There we are. So this is card front size. The whole stencil is 6.5 by 4.5. And the working area that's actually cut out is 3.5 by about 5 3/4. So I'm just going to pop that on here. Now I applied the embossing body over the top while I was talking, so in case you missed that, this is an anti-static bag. It helps to make sure that when I add embossing powder, I'm only going to get it sticking where I want it, which is where the ink will be, where the Versamark ink is. I don't want it anywhere else. So I'm just going to pop that down there on my card. Again, I could stick this down. I'm not going to. I'm just going to hold it in place because this is just a demonstration. With my sponge dauber, I'm just going to pick up some of this Versamark ink and then kind of dab just to make sure I've got ink on there, but I haven't got great big blobs of it because I don't want pools of ink going through my stencil, otherwise I won't get a clean shape to the image. And after a bit of trial and error, I found that working around in a circle gets a better result than dabbing up and down, but you experiment and see. So I'm just going to go over, really over the whole thing with reasonable pressure. And particularly if you're in reasonable light, you can actually see when you've applied the ink, so you can hopefully see if you've missed a bit or if it's all gone down fine. I'm not doing every single bit on this because this is just to show you how to do it. There we are. So I'm now going to peel off my stencil. And you can probably, if I lift it up, you can probably see where that Versamark ink is. And then I'm going to pour on my embossing powder. So this is silver. Now you are more likely to get a distressed finish to your embossing when you're using a stencil than if you're using a stamp. So be prepared for that. And love it. Once you've had plenty of practice with applying the embossing powder, you should find that you get a pretty neat and detailed finish. So I've tipped on the embossing powder, I've tipped off the excess, and you can see that it has stuck to my snowflakes because the sticky Versamark ink was in that shape on the card. And I always put my embossing powder in a bigger box. I just get these from the pound shop or somewhere like that because it's so much easier to spoon it on and tip it off into there rather than having to mess around with tipping it onto scrap paper and then tipping it back into those tiny little pots. So now I've got my heat tool here, a reminder that heat guns create very, very hot air at the business end. So when you're using them, just be careful you don't aim them towards your skin or your hair. I'm going to turn it on and just let it warm up for a few seconds and then come in and heat this. So apologies for the noise, there's nothing I can do about that. If you haven't done much heat embossing before, you get a much better effect if you hold the heat tool in one place till the powder has melted and then move it on, rather than using it like a hairdryer, which is very tempting because it sounds like a hairdryer. But keep it still and then just move it in increments like that. That will work much better. And as soon as the powder has melted, move on. If you overheat the powder, it goes dull and it sinks into the card and you don't get that lovely shiny embossed finish. So here we go. Always give it just a few minutes for the first time round, just for it to warm up. I will be very careful not to get this near my hands. And it's just starting to go now. Can you see that turn into a bright silver? I hope you can. are. So sorry about the noise. But there we are. So that's a really easy way to use any stencil with embossing powder. Now, I haven't got a sample using this, but my next sample, once I've shown you the next technique, the sample for that, you could use embossed snowflakes in an identical way. So keep that thought in your head while I move on. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to use Enamel Effect and Spritz the snowflakes. So let me put some kitchen paper down first of all, and then I'll explain how I make my shimmer spray. I'm also going to just wipe over this stencil with a baby wipe, which is a bit more practical than going to the sink with it, just to get most of that sticky Versamark ink off. It doesn't have to be 100% clean. There we are, that will do. Alright, so I've got a Stampin Spritzer here with a very small amount of rubbing alcohol in it. In the UK, I've never actually managed to find this in the shops. I know in the US you can buy it in any old drugstore, but this is isopropyl alcohol. It's not the same as surgical spirit. Surgical spirit, which we can buy readily, will turn your card yellow over time, so don't be tempted to use that. This is 70% isopropyl alcohol, but it's very easy to find online on places like eBay, but also elsewhere. And get the 70% one. That's much more versatile. There's a 90% one as well, with a higher proportion of alcohol, but I find the 70% one works really well. And I'm using alcohol instead of water because it dries so much more quickly. Now, I don't need much spray for what I'm showing you, so I've only got a little bit of alcohol in here. If you're doing lots of projects or a big project, then by all means fill your spritzer up. And what I'm then going to add are metallic enamel effects. So these are the silver ones, and you can find these in the annual catalogue on page 137. And I actually did a Facebook Live using these a little while ago, maybe a month ago or so, not long anyway. And I'm going to squeeze the enamel effects into here. And I'm probably not going to be able to very easily show you how much I've put in, but let me try. So I've got about that much in the bottom, and my alcohol was up to about here. But to be honest, this is trial and error. So put some in, put a little bit less than you think you need. Give it a really good shake, have a little spritz on some scrap card, and then if it's not as sparkly as you want, add a bit more enamel effects. I don't recommend storing this because it can block up your little spritzer cap there, the little nozzle where the spray comes out. So I always wash mine when I've finished. In fact, I've got on the floor down here next to me a bowl with some soapy water in it that I'm going to drop this in as soon as I've finished, because I really don't want the nozzle to block up. That's just a pain all round. Let me cap that again. So all I'm going to do is lay my stencil on top of my card, check where the nozzle is facing so I don't spray myself, and then spray. Just takes a minute for the spray to feed up into the spritzer. So the spray is going down into all those apertures on the stencil. Do this in a well ventilated room because you can definitely smell that alcohol coming off into the air. And this doesn't look awfully exciting when you've just done it, but I will show you a dried one. You can see a little bit of sparkle, but as that dries, the silver becomes much more pronounced. So I'm just going to pop that stencil in my bowl, and I'm just going to disassemble this and pop that in there too. And this cap does come off so that the water can get in easily. And then once I've finished here, I should give all that a really good scrub, and I'll spray some water through the nozzle, and that will come nice and clean. Right, so let me show you a sample that I've done. So here we are. feels weird making Christmas cards in August, but here we go. So this is the same Starry Sky card, and this central panel, and I'll try and catch the light on it. From seeing it here, I can distinctly see silver snowflakes on it. It doesn't look like that's coming out awfully well on your camera, but they are sparkly snowflakes. Then the card base, I've used the same stencil, but just with Starry Sky ink, so the same colour as my card. So I've got those snowflakes, but I've got them here in blue and here in silver. Then I've added some die-cut silver foil snowflakes. These are from the Chic dies. They coordinate with, I think they're called Season of Chic stamps, which have got images for all 4 seasons. And then you've got a sneak peek here, May Your Christmas Be Merry and Bright. That is a sneak peek from the new catalogue. And the set is called Joy to You. And then I've cut these circles. This is also a sneak peek. There is a huge set of deckled circle dies in the new catalogue. I think it's 14 dies. And the biggest one is huge. The biggest one is about 5.5 inches across. And then on the inside, another sentiment from that same Joy to You stamp set, and stenciled some snowflakes inside. Now, if you were using the panel with the heat embossed snowflakes, you could use that as your centre panel exactly the same, but you probably wouldn't need to add die cut snowflakes. That rhinestone's moved. I'm just going to have to put that back. There we are. I didn't want it on the foil. So there we are. So that is using heat embossing and using Enamel Effects to make a shimmery spray. Okay, where are we for time? Not too bad, because I started a little bit late, didn't I? Alright, so what about gilding flakes? I love gilding flakes. A little bit of gold just makes everything look so beautiful. So let's use some. I'll tell you what I'm digging out from here in just a minute. This stencil is from a pack that's in the annual catalogue, which is called the Artistic Mix. And you'll find those on page 136 in the annual catalogue. I've also pulled out, obviously, some cards to work with, which I can't find. There we go. Some card there. I'm going to bring back my block with my Versamark ink refill and my sponge dauber. And then I will have 2 other things. I have heat and stick powder, which is also in the annual catalogue. It's a powdered glue which melts when it gets hot. And I have Gilded Leafing. Again, this comes in a smaller pot, but I pop it into a box like this, which I find is much easier to use it with, and you'll see why in a minute. So I'm going to pop the lid back on that. The Gilded Leafing is so lightweight that it very, very easily blows away. So the process for this is similar in a way to heat embossing. I'm going to lay the stencil down over my card. I'm going to put Versamark ink through the stencil. I'm going to lift the stencil up and tip on the heat and stick powder and tip off the excess, and then heat it. So just the same as if I was doing heat embossing. The final extra step is to add the Gilded Leafing. So let's get going. I've got some Versamark on here. I think I'm going to need just a little bit more. Sandy's saying the sound is up and down too. I'm really sorry, Sandy. Somebody else said that. Facebook did an update, unfortunately, earlier this week, and it's causing the same problems that it always causes. I don't know why. They resolve in time, and there isn't anything I can do from my end. I've taken technical advice on it, and it's a Facebook thing, and I don't know why, and it's very annoying. So my apologies for that. My heart sank when I saw that there was an update coming, because I thought, oh no, here we go again with the sound. so my apologies. It's not to do with me moving, it's not a faulty microphone my end. She said the project looks great. Thank you. Well, that's the main thing. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing, even if the clarity of the sound is not great. Okay, so I'm just doing exactly as I did before. I'm just using my sponge dauber in a circular motion, pushing that Versamark through the stencil. For this, I'm particularly not trying to get it through absolutely every little aperture. I'm just going for some of it. Because I like a kind of distressed look. You get a bit of a distressed look anyway with the gilding powder, so it's better to kind of embrace that than to try and get something perfect and be disappointed. So now I'm going to tip on heat and stick, which is going to attach itself to wherever there is Versamark ink. And the next bit won't be very exciting. You'll hardly be able to see the heat and stick powder on here, and I don't think you'll be able to see it as it melts. So it doesn't make for a very good video, but it's worth it once the gold leafing goes on. There we are. So heat and stick powder, it's basically a powdered glue. So I'm now going to use my heat tool on it just as if it was embossing powder. The one thing to remember with heat and stick powder is that the minute it melts, move on. If you overheat this, contrary to what you might think, it actually loses its stickiness. I think you can just about see that on there. Okay, so I'm just going to give this a minute or two to warm up, and then I will melt this. It won't take me very long. There we go. So the powder goes see-through and pretty much invisible as soon as it melts. So that is now glue on there. Sticky glue. So I'm just going to kind of shake this around in the box. So I've got a layer on the bottom, and then drop this in there and push it down. And you can probably see this is flying everywhere. I've now got little gold flecks everywhere. And then when I pick it up, it looks like a bit of a disaster area. But what I have got is I've got a little bit of sponge here. You could use a sponge dauber. You can use all sorts of things. You can use a paintbrush, but I like using a piece of sponge. I find that works best for me. And I'm going to be fairly firm. I'm going to push this on here first of all, but then I'm actually going to brush off all the excess. And the gold leaf will stick to the glue, and the glue is in the shape of the Versamark, and the Versamark is in the shape of the stencil. And I do love a distressed look, and you will get a distressed look with this. And if you've been a little bit rough and brushed off too much of the gold leafing, you'll feel there are tacky areas. I don't think I've got any tacky areas. So I'm just going to brush a little bit more, just get some of that detail coming in. The gold leafing breaks into tiny little pieces, and you can end up with kind of, I don't know even what to call it, crumbs of gold leaf on there which aren't attached, although they look like they are. So going over it a couple of times does allow you to get rid of all of those. Right, I'm just going to get as much of that back in the box as I can, put the lid on quickly. I have a very sparkly dress on. I'm going to pop that back in its bag. I keep this just for the gilded leafing, and I'm just going to quickly go over my grid paper with a damp baby wipe just to pick up the worst of those little bits. Okay, I saw a comment come up from Jackie. Let me see what she said. Sandy's hasn't used her gold leafing flakes in quite a while. She says it's something she must try again. Jackie's got lots of it in her stash, but she hasn't used it with heat and stick. She says it's a great idea with the stencils. She'll have to buy some and a Versamark refill. I'm glad you're enjoying the tips and techniques, Jackie. Thank you. So there we go. There is my distressed gold. The gold is so rich. I really love it. Now, you might be thinking at this stage, this looks a little bit like something that probably should just go in the bin. However, have faith, because I've got a Christmas card to show you, because gold just screams Christmas to me. So this is, I'm trying to remember what these are called, Festive Trees, I believe it is, dies. I've used the deckled circles there, so that's 2 sneak peeks from the new catalogue for you. And this again is from the Joy to You stamp set. So I've used the same stencil on the background here. I've got the distressed gold leafing, which I think is perfect for background because it's there and it's beautiful and rich and metallic and Christmassy, but it doesn't take over the card. And then the background paper here is the, it's called Distressed Gold paper. It's in the annual catalogue. Thank you, Sandy. I'm glad you like it. I love gold for Christmas. I've also cut one of the trees from it, and the other 2 are from Shaded Spruce. And I did pop a little die cut tree inside. So there we are. So that is an idea for gilded leafing. And then finally, I'm going to use the same stencil. I'm going to give it a very quick baby wipe over, but it doesn't really matter if there's still Versamark ink on it for this. I'm going to use some texture paste, embossing paste. Stampin Up call it embossing paste. Other manufacturers call it texture paste. It's great for mixed media art, and I've used lots of different brands in my time, but I have to say I really do like the Stampin Up one. It's very lightweight, it dries very fast, which is great if you're impatient like I am. So let me pull out the bits and then I'll tell you what I've got here. So I'm going to use this same stencil. This is a real favourite of mine, and if you could actually see it, you'll see it's got all kinds of traces of stuff I've used on it in the past on there. Okay, so this is the embossing paste. We've got one with a sparkle and an ordinary one. This is the ordinary one. This is just white. Once you've opened it, it's a really good idea to scrunch up a piece of kitchen paper, damp kitchen paper. So put it under the tap, squeeze it out so it's wet but not dripping, but you want it damp. Scrunch it up and just push it into the top here and put the lid on, and then store it upside down. And that's about everything you can do to keep the air out, because the air in this pot, when I put the lid on, because obviously you've got a gap between the top of the paste and the top where the lid is, will contribute to drying out the paste. Depending on the weather, the temperatures and the humidity, it'll dry out slower or faster. But putting some damp, scrunched up kitchen paper in there really helps. So just push it in so it's in. You don't have to push it into the paste, and then lift it out. You'll get a little bit of paste sticking to the paper, but not very much. Use your paste next time, pop that same bit of paper back in, and that means that this will last, for me anyway, it lasts for absolutely months once it's been opened. So the first thing I'm going to do is colour some of this, because white's nice, but colour's also nice. So I've got one of the palette knives. We've got a really nice, very reasonably priced set of palette knives in the catalogue. So I'm going to hook out a little bit of paste. That's probably, it's less than a teaspoonful anyway. And I've made a mental note that I now need to put some kitchen paper in that. That was new when I opened it the other day, so I need to do as I'm saying. And then I've got some re-inker. I'm working on a silicone matte here because it's very easy clean up that way. And I'm going to put just a couple of drops, or even one, I can always come back and put another one of re-inker near it, but not in it, because I don't know how much re-inker I'm going to need for this particular quantity of paste I've just scooped out to colour it the colour I want. And every re-inker is different. Some are more concentrated, some are less. So this is Lost Lagoon. So I've just dipped my palette knife in that re-inker, taken out a tiny little bit, and now I'm going to mix it into this paste. It's a little bit like icing in consistency. And I'm just mixing it. I'm going to mix it in completely, but you can actually kind of swirl it through, and then when you put the paste through the stencil, you'll get a kind of a marbled effect, which is also fun. And that is probably enough. I don't think I even need any more. So I'll bring in my card, put that down, put my embossing, what is this? This is a stencil, or a mask if you're Stampin' Up, but I call it a stencil. Put my stencil down on top. I could stick it down, but I'm just going to hold it in place. And then I'm going to pick up some of that paste on my palette knife and just spread it. So I'm holding this palette knife at roughly a 45-degree angle. I've got the paste underneath the knife rather than on top, because obviously I want it between the knife and the stencil. And then it's a little bit like buttering toast. And keeping your palette knife at an angle means that you can push the paste right the way through the stencil, and scrape it off the top, reuse any extra that's on top, and get it all the way through. Now this is really fun to do with paste that you've coloured several different colours. So have 2 or 3 little piles of paste on your silicone mat and colour them different colours, and you can put one colour down there and then the next one and then the next one, and you can end up with a beautiful ombre effect. That's one of my favourite things to do with it. But for today we're just really focusing on the fact that we're using the stencils. So I'm just now trying to make sure that I've got it through all the holes in the stencil to give me a continuous background. Now you can of course only go through some of them and end up with a distressed background as well, which looks great. Can't actually see where the edges of my card are. I think I've got them all. And then peel up the stencil, and like magic you have the most beautiful textured background. So I'm going to let that dry. It will dry really quite quickly, 20 minutes very often, half an hour or so maybe if it's a slightly damper day, not so warm. And then that's ready to use as a background for anything. I'm going to put this straight in my bowl of water because I don't want that embossing paste to dry on the stencil, because it's much harder, if not impossible, to get off if you do that. And I am just going to get the worst of it off this grid paper. And also off my silicone mat and my palette knife. So the palette knife will go straight in the bowl of water, and so will the mat. I would normally use up all the paste. If I'm getting this out, I usually make a stack of pieces at a time. I don't like to waste it, but there wasn't too much on there luckily. So let's show you a card that I made with that. So I used a different colour here. I used Fresh Freesia re-inker. It's actually gone quite pink. I didn't use very much of it, so we're kind of in the pink spectrum. I think if I'd used a little bit more, it would have gone more on the lilac. And then this is cut with the Gorgeously Made dies. This leaf stamp is also in the Gorgeously Made stamps. And I've used soft seafoam ink and soft seafoam card. The backing layer here and here is Fresh Freesia, and this is Blackberry Bliss ink and the Something Fancy stamps, and then I've used a couple of adhesive sequins on here. So they make really pretty textured pieces. Thank you, Sandy. I'm glad you like that. Thank you, Jackie. You got texture paste in your stash from mixed media playing. Right, get it out, Jackie. Okay, so that is the sixth technique I wanted to show you today with stencils. So what I am going to do is just turn this grid paper over because it's incredibly messy, and lay out the samples just for you to look at again. It's not very good this side, but it's a bit better than it was. All right, let me see if I can reach them. So we have the 2 sunflowers. I'll have to do this in 2 goes, I think, actually. 2 sunflowers and the autumn leaves. So these were all done blending layers of ink through stencils. Every time you do one of these, it will be different, even if you use the same colours. So you're very much making one-of-a-kind projects. I've made all cards, but these would be beautiful on albums or scrapbook pages. And who doesn't love a sunflower? So that is those. Then we did the shimmer spray and the heat embossing. I'll pop that there just to remind you. This one's got the shimmer spray on it. We did gilded leafing, I ought to call it really, it isn't actually gold. I'm sure you know that. And then finally we used the texture paste. So there we go, 6 different ideas for using masks and stencils. And of course, in the first part of this a couple of weeks ago, I did some more. I talked about the basics of cleaning them and everything else, and doing more simple things with them. But I do think they are really fun for more of the kind of the mixed media style. So if you've got them in your stash, I hope you will have a go. Oh, thank you, Jackie. You're filling Helen in on the problem with the sound. I'm sorry about the problem with the sound, Helen. It's a Facebook update. It will resolve in a little while. Every time they do an update, the sound is affected. It's completely out of my control. I have taken some technical advice, and it's nothing to do with anything I can do my end. It's not to do with me moving my head or anything. It's a pain in the proverbial. Okay, I'm just going to turn the camera back up to see you now. Obviously you can go back and re-watch this at any point if there's anything that you want to go over again or remind yourself of. This will sit on Facebook, on my Facebook page, but I also upload it to my YouTube channel, which is also called Handmade at Home with Sally Bowman, so it will be there later today. Thank you, Sandy. I'm really glad you enjoyed the project. Thank you, Helen. And it's lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be back in 2 weeks' time in September, which will be, I think, the 8th of September. And I haven't decided what I'm doing yet. So I will put up a Facebook event with the subject matter, but I hope to see you all then. In the meantime, have a lovely bank holiday weekend and take care. Bye-bye.